All right, we did it. Raymond, how are you? How's everything?
How are you? Great to see you, Mario.
Great to see you too. It's been a while. Last time I think we
Yes.
actually were together was at an Array of Hope event, which you were so gracious to be at, and
Yes, that
uh,
was fun.
it
I
was great.
remember.
Yeah, it was so good. You are one busy dude. You're like the hardest working guy in Catholic media. I mean, everywhere I go, you're on television, and so it's exciting. You're really doing well. God bless you.
Well, it's the penitential aspect of Advent. I'm trying to spread that devotion, Mario.
I know you have limited time, and thank you so much for squeezing us in. And I have a lot of
Sure.
questions I want to ask you. And forgive me, I want to go back a little bit. I want to go a little bit back as to when you started. And I know
Okay.
you have a very interesting background. So you kind of started, well, you're a music guy, and you were involved in theater and music. And maybe you could share a little bit about your background there.
Well, I was trained as an actor in New York. Studied with Stella Adler, who was a great acting, one of the apostles of American acting in the theater. I directed, I acted, I did musicals after that, and then I kind of segued into journalism because I was so bored with the the repetitive nature of being in a show. It's
Mm.
so set, it's so definite. There's very little room to operate, or innovate. And for me, once you've done 3 weeks of a show, you kind of have all your moves. You know what you're going to do. You know the varieties that you can pull out of the character or different interpretations of the line. And yes, things happen and you can keep it fresh. But for me, after that time, I kind of I lost intellectual interest. So
Hmm.
I segued out, and look, here I am back doing a Christmas album and on the road. But it's very different. It's your show. You can bend things and change them and open some numbers up. I do some numbers at one place. I won't do it another.
Hmm.
So I like the flexibility and the variety of that.
So when you were acting, you did drama and Broadway, that kind of stuff. So you
I
sang,
did
you did
Shakespeare,
musical
I did
theater,
Moliere,
musical theater.
in
Yeah.
London and New York,
Wow, good for you.
and musicals in between. Yeah.
That's great. And then, I mean, I do see that when you're broadcasting, you're very dramatic and you use a lot of expression, and that's good. That adds a whole element of excitement to when you're interviewing people. It really, you could see it
Yeah.
come through. Let's go.
You
Leave
learn
it.
a lot from performance. You
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
You learn most of all when you're dealing. I mean, it's a critical thing in any kind of performance when you're working with another person. It's that sense of opposites, that balance that you need. So if your partner is very demonstrative and they're really out there and they're giving you a lot of energy, you pull way back.
Hmm.
You pull way back and you let them kind of breathe. And then when they're on the down slope, you need to bring the energy to balance that out and lift it up. But that kind of duality, that sort of complementarity, you only really learn once you've done it a long time, or
Yeah.
you've done it in different genres, and and things bleed back and forth. Things I've learned from television, I bring to the live performance, and things I
Hmm.
learn in live performance, I bring to TV. So it's learning how to modulate and use both of them.
Well, you're a consummate interviewer. I love it. I love watching you. So I want to go back a little bit to your Catholic faith. Were you a cradle Catholic? Were you always Catholic? And
Yeah, well, I grew up in New Orleans. I mean, when you're in New Orleans, the Protestants are Catholic in New Orleans because you can't escape it. We have so many evocative festivals and colorful communal events, and our food. I did a thing called Christmas Time in New Orleans for PBS a few years ago, and it was really about how the food of New Orleans and the music of New Orleans is really just an outgrowth of a topping over, if you will, of the 9 different nationalities that are occupy this little tiny bit of earth. And the German and the French and the African American and the Spanish and the Italian and the Irish, the French. When you bring all of those cultures together and you lock them into a little place, and there's intermarriage and sharing of recipes and musical tastes and musical notes and approaches, it creates something completely new. And whether it's gumbo or red beans and rice or coffee and chicory or our jazz, all of that is the same thing. So, and it's all an outgrowth of faith in some ways. And when you watch that, you can't help but be Catholic and remain Catholic because it's in the air. I mean, it haunts you. So even people I know who aren't Catholic at all, they're swept up in the rhythm of the church. And that's one of the lovely things about New Orleans. And there are many things that are not so lovely, crime and other things. But one of the beauties of the city is that liturgical rhythm no one can escape. Even the visitors are caught up in it. Whether it's the preparation for Lent, Mardi Gras, or Advent. We have beautiful caroling in Jackson Square, and they have concerts every night at the cathedral. They're kind of things that mark the year for us. And they are inevitably tied to liturgical feasts and festivals, and that's church. I always say, in New Orleans, in other places, evil hides and so does good. Mm-hmm. But in New Orleans, the sacred and the profane dance right out in public in very bold ways. You can't miss either. Wow. And I prefer it that way. I hate going to places where everything's behind closed doors. Nobody talks of faith, nobody talks of evil, but it's all there. Mm. You get the effects. You don't get any of the lead in or lead up.
I've been in New Orleans maybe once or twice. It is a very lively city, very active. Yeah. I want. So when was the merging between your faith and EWTN and meeting Mother Angelica? And by the way, I've been reading your books. They are just great. I love, I just picked up her book of her sayings, which I hadn't read.
The little book of life lessons.
Yeah, right on, right here. Yeah, man, I just brought it up. I've been reading that, and it's just wonderful. I mean, she was so prolific. So I'm asking a bunch of questions here at the same time. So when did your broadcasting desire and EWTN merge? And I know that you interviewed Mother Angelica for 2 years, which is a whole nother question. So you get where I'm going at. I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you the quick background. The quick background is I was in journalism before I came to EWTN.
Right.
I worked for the Associated Press. I worked for Bob Novak. Helped shape his column at the Washington Post. I helped produce for him at Crossfire when he was there. I was a Capitol Hill correspondent for the Family Channel. And then a friend of mine asked me to write an article about Mother Angelica. That's how we met. She asked me to start the news division for her. I initially told her no. I did not want to move to Birmingham, Alabama. She wore me down. I won't get into that whole story, but it's a great one. And we became very close, meeting her. Mother was obviously an Italian, a Calabrese. I'm half Sicilian, so I understood that part of her. I understood her sensibility, her cultural roots, how she kind of saw the world, and so we were very close. I mean, we were friends. She was like a grandmother to me in many ways, and I approached her about writing her biography in 1999, believe it or not. And she agreed to cooperate, and for almost 3 years we did interviews several times a week, and then weekends for 8 hours at a stretch. And the fruit of that was not only the biography and the sequel, which fewer people are aware of, but I did a sequel to the biography called Her Grand Silence about the last years of her life, the last 16 years. And that may be more compelling and more interesting to me, anyway, than the original biography.
What was it? So, what were the early years at EWTN doing the news program there? What was it like for you? Was it exhilarating? I mean, you're really emerging your Catholic faith with, your professional career. What was that like?
Well, you see, and I ask this question often too, Mario. So I'm not getting on you for asking it. I just asked it of a friend of mine on air the other day, but. I don't think the faith is not something I keep in a bottle on a shelf and then use when it serves me. No, your faith is just who you are. It's like blood. It's like breath. It's like life. So inevitably, if you believe something, it's going to have an effect and shape what you do. I push away and have always for 27 years at EWTN, 28 years. I've always rejected the idea of, and I never go by Catholic journalist. I'm not a Catholic journalist. I'm a journalist who's Catholic.
Right on.
Because that thing has very loaded connotations for me anyway. So no, you want the work to stand on its own. It has to be credible, exciting, insightful. You have to hold an audience. And if you can't do all those things, you really can't do the work.
Right.
So, I mean, look, my father had a mechanic shop for years. Nobody ever called him a Catholic mechanic, but he was very faithful. He was good to his people. He had a full house. He couldn't fix all the cars he had because he was really good at what he did. So I would rather somebody be great at what you're at, do it well, do it with integrity and a moral sense, and serve the common good. That's being, a Catholic, whatever. But that moniker oftentimes is used to condone mediocrity. That I don't like.
Right.
That I hate, actually. And you're just what you are. You're either an author or a cook or a mechanic or a legal secretary. But to put the Catholic in front of it, don't bring the church into your success or your mediocrity. It's either there or it isn't. What you do is what you do. And yes, of course, the faith informs that. Or for bad Catholics, it doesn't inform it at all. And some of them call themselves Catholic, whatever, too. So I blanch a bit at that. I always have kind of recoiled at that moniker.
Yeah.
I think it's not applicable.
Yeah.
People will know who you are through your work and by the fruit of that work.
I guess what I mean is, like, I was in the secular space for many, many years, and then I formed Array of Hope. And what it gave me is that since my work is in a way, or indirectly or directly, serving the church and glorifying the church, it gives me a great sense of purpose. It gives me a great sense that not only am I doing something professionally at the highest quality, which is what you do, but you are serving the church and glorifying the church. I guess that was the point of my question, in the sense that, there's got to be a sense of fulfillment that, okay, good and faithful servant, because I'm doing what the Lord is asking me to do. It's my vocation. So,
well, look, in my case, Mother Angelica, when we started EWTN News all those years ago, she gave me a very simple charge. She said, follow the truth wherever it leads, and you will have the freedom to tell the truth here, but follow the truth wherever it leads. And I saw and watched her and the suffering she went through and the torture she underwent to tell that truth. And look, I've been subjected to them in my own time. It was a great lesson to watch her and how she dealt with that, because, there is a cost. And, but that's what we're called to do. That's the mission. So we do it. We continue doing it.
Amen.
But I don't, to me, it's just, you glorify God by doing the good job and using the gifts he gave you. Advertising and branding it that way is not, to me, all that important.
Well, you said a couple of things here that resonate for me. You said, just say the truth. And it seems that there's an aisle that's divided, and there's, even within the Catholic Church, there's people that believe to be one truth and another side of the church that believes to be another. And we've had, Father Gerald Murray on here as well, and I discussed this with him as well. And I love your show, The Papal Posse. And so there's a lot of stuff going on in our church. It's very divisive, and I know that today is the aftermath of an announcement that happened most recently in the Pope. And so you're dealing with this stuff all the time. We're dealing it almost as trying to deflect as an evangelization organization to try to still proclaim the truths of the church in a way that is relevant and meaningful, but there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of distractions. So, and I think I know where you stand on a lot of it. You seem to be very conservative in your thinking of the church based on your interviews. So how does it feel? What do you think's going? How does it feel for you being in the middle of all this? What is your assessment of what's going on in the church?
Well, this is why I write children's books. I tell stories, and I record Christmas albums.
Amen.
No, and I mean that with complete, not as a joke.
No, I understand why.
It keeps me sane.
Right.
It helps me do what I think I'm really called to do, which is uplift people, unite people, and help them find the truth.
Yeah.
In their own way, through whatever vehicle it might be. So look, I have to report on this. I have to report on murders and guys doing unspeakable things in Senate hearing rooms. Yeah. And I don't want to get into letter and verse of it all, because it's there are days where I feel like a guy I once knew who was a vice cop. He was a detective in the New Orleans Police Department. And at the end of the day, he would come home because he was working vice. any body that turned up, he had to go. And in New Orleans, you have to actually go to the coroner's office and watch the autopsy. The investigating detective has to be present.
Wow.
I sometimes feel like that investigating detective. And he said I would come home and my clothes so reeked of, post-autopsy. I won't get into the details of it, but he would literally take his clothes off before he entered the house. He had a bin outside where he would put them, that he'd just take them to the cleaners. That's how I sometimes feel what I should be doing after covering so much of this stuff inside and outside the church. It's ugly, it's disgusting, it's horrible. I wish there are many, many days I wish I didn't have to do it, because I know it's confusing to people. It's confusing to me. It's divisive. It's ugly. I think in some ways it's against the truth, polar opposite to, I think, what Christ is and what he called us to. But ultimately, that's not my call to make. My call is only to ask the right questions, and that's all we do, ask the right questions, and hold ourselves to a standard that considers the context of everything. The sun didn't just come up yesterday, and the church hasn't just appeared on the map today. So we have a 2,000-year tradition that things have to be in continuity of or break the continuity of. And I sadly have to be the investigating detective who points that out and conducts the autopsy. So that's how I feel about it. To be blunt, I mean, I'll just tell you, Mario, I find joy in my family, my friends, and the stories I get to tell, outside of the reporting that I have to do. That's the duty, but it's not where I find my joy. I'll just be blunt with you.
No, it's funny. You actually read my mind. I was going to ask you, where is the hope? Where is the joy? And you kind of said it. I mean, you said it before I asked it. I mean, the hope is the gates of hell will not prevail. Jesus is still in control, right? It's his church, and it's going through its passion. But to find the gifts that we've been received, your family, the many things that bring you joy. I love the idea that essentially your books and your music, not that it's your hobby, but it's a distraction from stuff that really can distract you.
It's where my heart lives. It's where my heart lives. I protect my heart from the rest of this because it's in the way that these detectives look. I mean, it's interesting. They shared that kind of how they compartmentalize the horrors they had to see during the day and their daily lives. Now, look, there's bleed over, in both cases. But and there are times I wish there weren't, but there is. But yeah, you try to tell the truth no matter where you are. I mean, that's the real goal, whether I'm telling stories, fictional or otherwise, or doing music. You have to be true in that moment. You have to be true. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And I do find joy in that. I do. Yeah. Awesome. Watching kids' faces light up, or recognition, or they hear a bit of history or a story they've never heard before and it changes them. That's really gratifying. Or when an audience, explodes with joy over something you've just sung and you've got, 20 pieces behind you. That's exciting, and that's a joy too. That's a thrill.
Yeah. I listened to some of that music. It's kicking, man. It's really, really good. You sing really well. And
thank you.
The arrangements, I forgot the arranger that did a lot.
Kevin Koska. Yeah, he's a great guy.
Have you done anything like that have you done like just regular jazz records or standard records before?
No. And I wanted the first album to be Christmas because I love Christmas music so much. It is, and it's rich. There's a lot of territory there to explore. The backstories, the origin stories, what these songs really mean as opposed to what we think they mean over time. That was cool to kind of resituate them and reframe them in a new context, big band, but to rekindle the excitement of some of these Christmas hymns that I think had lost their punch. And in doing, we've lost the meaning. We've lost the power of those words and what they were meant to convey in the first place. So the album really was my effort to do that, to re-energize and rediscover these Christmas classics. A lot of singers, and I have to say this, a lot of singers sing along. Whether they're doing Christmas songs or they're doing any other songs, they sing along. my favorite singers always intentionally sang and bent everything, their performance, the orchestration, their approach, the breath. You bend it to that particular song. You serve the song. In the same way I have to serve a story as a journalist. You don't just kind of read it, by rote because it's in the teleprompter. That's not your job.
Right.
Your job is to serve that story. Sometimes it's a light story, sometimes it's a dark story, and depending on it, you have to accommodate that.
Yeah.
It's the same way with music.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to find the proper approach with my instrument in conveying that song. What can you do unique with it? What's your particular point of view?
Yeah.
And that's what Merry and Bright, the Christmas album, was all about.
Well, I would encourage you to do something outside of Christmas as well. I mean, you're basically saying your interpretation of the style of the music is distinctive to you. I mean, Sinatra was a classic at that. Tony Bennett.
Well, look, I saw Frank Sinatra 30 times in concert. I'm a huge Sinatra fanboy.
Wow.
I'll just tell you right out.
Nice.
And I saw Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan, and incredible singers. Keely Smith, whom I knew, Johnny Mathis. Some of these people I knew personally. So when you see Mount Olympus like that, the worst thing you can do, and I see this a lot, young performers see that, they hear Sinatra or they hear Dean Martin, and they imitate them.
Right.
They really are imitating them, or
right.
they use their arrangements, which is the worst thing you can do. Yeah. That would be like me getting Frank Sinatra's suits and trying to wear his suits on air. And now I'm Frank Sinatra. No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're you. Right. You have to be you.
Right.
And I figured that out pretty early on. You can't be that. You'll never be that.
Right.
He did his own thing. He had his own gifts, and you have your own.
Right.
But look, there are things you certainly take from those examples. Most notably, in my case, with Sinatra, his phrasing, his showmanship, his devotion to the song. He never phoned it in. He never sang along.
Yeah.
And I could name a couple of other singers who just sing along. They just na 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 na. They kind of. They sing along. Sinatra never sang along. You felt it was coming from a deep place in him, and he had a point of view and a conviction about it.
Yeah.
It was real for him. He was an actor. Yeah. Nobody acted through song the way Sinatra did. There may be two people, Sinatra and Judy Garland, the greatest interpreters of song, and I think the greatest actors of music, maybe in American life.
Yeah. I saw him a couple of times. He was much older, but I think young musicians don't realize, especially the Capitol years in the 60s when he recorded those with Nelson Riddle. Those were live records in a studio. Yeah. The thing was live, no overdubs. It's astounding. Yeah. Just the musicianship. And like you said, the phrasing that he had was just beautiful.
Mario, we did that with our album. I wanted, originally we were going to record the band because look, it's expensive.
I saw that in the videos. Pieces. You recorded everything live. That was awesome.
We did it. Yeah, we did it in studio because you need that. Well, I wrestled with doing it because I get it. It's easier and cheaper to kind of record the tracks and go away and then come do it in the studio later. But what you're deprived of is the musical conversation with the guys you're playing with.
Right on.
And they start bending things and moving in one direction. You got to go with them. Yeah. And when you're in the room with them, it's easier to ride that wave, I think, than doing it in a booth. Yeah.
I got a question. So you've interviewed a plethora of great men and women. So is there anyone that stands out that you said, this guy's holy, or a cardinal or a bishop that, what? Thank God that he's in our church. Anyone that comes to mind that you could share that our audience could be inspired by their witness or their commitment to the church?
Tons of them, all of them. So many. Jenny Stepanek, who is Maddie Stepanek's mother, a woman suffering with, muscular, a very particular strain of muscular dystrophy. She was a saint. She is a saintly woman. Her son was a saintly kid. Who, through all of that disability, I think, made them more inclined toward God, and they could hear him more clearly because they were listening. Cardinal Van Thuan, who I interviewed, who was in an internment, a prison for many, many years, and they would bring him little pellets of bread and a drop of wine, which they said was his medication. People would smuggle it in. That's how he said mass, in literally what he called the chalice of his hand. And I've never forgotten that, those examples. Of course, I knew Pope Benedict. I knew John Paul II personally. Wow. Did the only interview with Benedict XVI in English. And he was a very humble, sweet, dear, holy man, and had a kind of wry, brilliant sense of humor that I appreciated. And my pal Jerry Lewis, I love Jerry. I love Mel Gibson, who I interviewed many times. Geniuses. I mean, on the other end of the spectrum, but what they gave us through cinema and through their performances is, again, using gifts for a higher and greater purpose, the glory of God, ultimately.
How did it happen with Fox News and Laura Ingraham, that whole connection?
Laura and I did radio for a number of years together. And then they asked us to do the Ingraham angle. And she and I said, yeah, let's do it. And she first. And it's been great. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's different. That's a different audience, a different contribution I make there. I try to keep things lighter because I think the world is too heavy.
Yeah.
It's all too much.
You're a good little combo together. It's fun watching.
Yeah, we have a good time.
I forget. You kind of did like a comedic bit too. A couple of years ago, was it? I forget what that was. It was
it was a take on the Abbott and Costello thing. It's the thing that
that's right.
The kids still stop me in the airport about. I get kids who come up. Are you the you guy? It was a take on. It was really our retake of Abbott and Costello. I mean, we wrote it. It was scripted.
Yeah.
But it was a little back and forth, playing off the show You. And did you see You? Well, of course I saw me. I'm here. No. Did you see You?
Cute.
The show You?
Yeah.
What show? I'm the same one no matter where I am. No. The show You on Netflix. I've never been on Netflix. What are you talking about? So we played it back and forth, and that thing exploded. So fun.
That's good. I have a couple of young people, parents that love the Will Wilder books that you've written. So I have to apologize. I've never read one myself, but
for shame, Mario.
I'm sorry. Although there's
a new year coming.
It's a new year. I'll grab a couple and read them to my grandkids. See, there you go.
You should.
I will.
They're fun stories.
So they asked me to ask you: do you have any new ones coming up? Are you working on any other things? Or
I am working on book 4. I get so many letters about this, and when I'm on tour this time, I've gotten irate children coming up to me saying, "What happens to Aunt Lucille? You have to tell us." There was a big cliffhanger at the end of the last book. I am working on book 4 and 5. They are very difficult books to write because though I write them for younger audiences, they're actually, I've always subscribed to the L. Frank Baum line, which is I write for the young and the young at heart. But I'm really, those books are filled with things that only adults will see. And then they're bits of that story that only a child can enjoy. But the ride in the foreground that the kids are enjoying is one ride. There's another in the background, which you have to kind of grow a little older to really fully appreciate. But they're great stories. I love Will. I love Perilous Falls and that whole world. And I will return to it. I just, between the picture books and the album and the news, it's been a lot. So I write all my books and do everything myself. I don't have ghostwriters. That's what I need to do. I need to hire a team of ghostwriters and let them just write this stuff and I'll edit it. That would be a lot easier. But you know what? I think you lose the personal touch.
Well,
you lose the particular worldview that I think only you can bring. And my thinking is, by the time I rewrite or edit what somebody else has written, I may as well write it myself. So that's what I do.
Yeah, it wouldn't be you. It'd be someone else's.
Well,
interpretation
you'd be surprised at the number of people I know who.
What you mentioned?
They just, there's some other guy writes it and they put their picture on it. And then they're out talking about the book. Oh,
you
not my jam.
You mentioned picture book. What's a picture book?
What's the picture book? I have I have one of the best-selling Christmas books, The Spider Who Saved Christmas, and The Wise Man Who Found Christmas was on the New York Times list for 7 weeks, the Spider book. And then I have a new series out from HarperCollins, which is called Turnabout Tales. And Turnabout Tales are young, great lives at a moment of crisis when they were told they couldn't do something or they had a huge failure. And the motto of the series is challenges faced, decisions made, history turned. And it's how, I'll give you the first book was about Thomas Edison. Edison was thrown out of school at 8 years old, told he couldn't be taught. He was an idiot. His mother took him home and homeschooled him and fed his passion, allowed him to tinker and make mistakes and blow things up and burn down barns. And he became, through that, the greatest inventor of all time, using and creating many of the things we're using now, lights, the microphone, all these things are Edison's. And that was the end of his formal training and book learning, if you will, in a school setting at 8 years old. So you want to give kids hope, and you want to show them, look, obstacles, even challenges, are not the end of your journey. They're sometimes the beginning of your journey. And that's what that series is about.
Why are they called picture books?
I don't really call them picture books. I call them family reads.
Oh,
but if picture books, to me, the picture is not limited to any age group. They are family reads because primarily grandparents, parents, moms, dads, aunts, uncles, they read to the child and the child reads to them.
Gotcha.
So that's the experience I wanted. And that's why we use the format of a picture book.
Oh, I
but
see.
they too are not really for little tiny kids. They're really for everybody.
Yeah.
And you're going to get different things from them. We have a recent book on Tad Lincoln that just came out this year, which is really cool, about the relationship between Abraham Lincoln and Tad Lincoln, and how together they created a national holiday tradition that we continue to this moment. It's called The Magnificent Mischief of Tad Lincoln. It's a sweet book.
Well, it looks like we covered a lot of stuff that you're doing. Is there anything new on the horizon that you want to share with us and our viewers that you...
Sleep. I hope to get some sleep in the new year, a little rest in between the thunderclaps. No, it's been good. Look, I'm only happy when I'm doing multiple things. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I'm a storyteller that craves variety. And whether I'm singing, whether I'm doing a report, whether I'm writing a book for young adults or adults, to me, it's all the same thing. It comes from the same place, which is you're telling the truth and you're trying to do it in a winsome, fun, engaging way that will reach different audiences. So as long as I'm doing that, I'm happy.
You're good.
I sleep well. I just don't sleep often.
Well, that's great. Well, listen, Raymond, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. It's been a pleasure, catching up with you, and God bless you and your family and all your endeavors.
Thank you, Mario.